headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.
Morning, Julia.
I'd have to say, I did find it absolutely extraordinary when the announcement was made yesterday that we are going to see the mask requirement continuing. If you go in a shop, a public transport, or other indoor places in Scotland, you're going to continue to have to wear a mask until April the 18th. Despite the 3 weeks' time, despite the fact that Nicola Sturgeon quite happily sat in a church in Westminster Abbey earlier this week without wearing a mask.
Well, yes, and there are even more subtle differences, even more differences that you go to a funeral, you can go to a church and not wear a mask after the first week in April, but, you've got to wait till the 18th before, you can go into a supermarket without wearing a mask. So, actually, I think that's a bit ridiculous. Well,
it's not just a bit. I mean, it's very ridiculous, isn't it?
It's 90% politics rather than anything else. Scotland has always had slight differences in the regulations, not fundamentally different ones, but often slightly more draconian. When we had draconian ones in England, a bit more draconian in Scotland.
But she's made a point of doing this at every press conference and every announcement. You always know it's going to be, whatever it is going to be different. But the fascinating thing here is when people talk about, we know masks work, and we've even had, the likes of Jenny Harries, the former Deputy Chief Medical Officer now at the National Security Agency, Health Agency. She's, talking about people should be avoiding indoor spaces because of massive case load at the moment, and we should be wearing masks again in indoor spaces. This despite the fact we have had this absolutely clear experiment in the UK. You can say that different countries have different cultures. We're comparing France or Sweden or Britain. In England, we've had mask rules in Wales, mask rules in Scotland, and mask rules in England that have changed at different times. We have seen quite categorically in a real-life experiment of real people wearing masks in the real world in real time, the masks made no difference whatsoever. And in fact, if they did make any difference, England's lighter rules and end of the mask mandate actually led to cases falling quicker and lower case rates in England than they did in Scotland and Wales. How can anyone still make the case for people putting random bits of cloth or blue paper over their faces to deal with COVID?
No, I agree. I think, the evidence on mask, the protection that you get from wearing a mask is very poor. There may be a slight degree. It's much more important if you've got the virus and wear a mask. But then you
shouldn't be leaving the house.
I know. Well, of course, the trouble is most people with Omicron don't feel particularly ill, but that's another matter altogether. Yeah. But the embarrassing fact, and I think it is an embarrassing fact, is that Scotland has a higher infection rate than England, despite the fact that we have more stringent rules here in Scotland. So, and particularly regarding masks. So that doesn't support any kind of notion that masks are particularly protective. And of course, if you look at the way, my neighbours in Aberdeen, look at the way people wear masks. Yeah. You know what Omicron does? Omicron specialises, and that's the virus that's doing the rounds. It specialises in growing in the nose. It doesn't grow terribly well in the throat, and it certainly doesn't go well down in the lungs. But people wear masks in such a way that many of them don't actually cover the nose. Just cover the mouth.
Or even when they cover the nose, it's only just that you can literally see the big gap. And I mean,
that's right. So that makes the wearing of the mask a nuisance rather than a protection.
Yeah. But we've even seen, Germany in January 2021, they not only had a mask mandate, you were not allowed to wear the little blue, paper ones. You weren't allowed to wear cloth ones. You had to wear the N95 or better, medical grade mask. Now, medical grade masks are better. They actually do serve more of a purpose, but they only have a much more significant effect if they are actually properly fitted and worn consistently and replaced, etc., which a lot of people don't do. They cost money, etc. But even Germany, those masks, that mask mandate, that worked all year until it didn't anymore. And that's the thing. There always seems to be the view that masks work unless they don't, in which case it's some other factor. The reality is Omicron, particularly Omicron B now, it's a much, much, much less dangerous virus. still can be dangerous to some people, particularly the elderly and the people who are health vulnerable, but it's much less dangerous. People are vaccinated, and people have chosen not to be vaccinated. I'm sorry that's your choice, but I don't see why it's got anything to do with anybody else. But the reality is this is not as serious a disease we need to worry about anymore. The idea we still need restrictions is a worry, and the concern, of course, is that we're going to go back to more calls for restrictions when we get the next wave, and we will get another wave.
Yes, we might get another wave. It might even be, theoretically, it could be nastier than Omicron B2. On the other hand, it might not be. We don't know. Yeah. We don't know. But at the end of the day, I've always been a bit of a skeptic about masks, and the evidence that the mask wearing being officially more rigorous in Scotland and England, but the infection rate being higher in Scotland and England, really, I think, it's under the waterline for masks. Yeah.
It puts that one to bed once and for all. Professor Hugh Pennington, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much, Dee.
Good talk.
Hot talk. Bold talk. Talk radio.
Listen on your smart speaker.
Watch it live on your smart TV.
The world headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.